Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode, I'd like to ask you all a shameless favor. If you could take a minute to rate the podcast 5 stars on iTunes and leave a review, it would really help us get the word out about the show and help others find it. We'd also like to invite you to join the conversation. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover, send us an email at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can either write in or record your suggestion. Either way is fine. Who knows? You may be featured on an upcoming episode. Now, on with the show.
The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
Country singer Reba McEntire once said, "Money will always be an issue, whether you have it or you don't." Personal finance is an issue at the core of every household, and each one has its own unique set of circumstances. Likewise, each community faces unique struggles that others may not have to think about. In a previous podcast, we discussed what one community is attempting to do in order to alleviate some of the financial stresses on the frum population. Today on the Jewish Living Podcast, we tackle the financial struggles from a different perspective, with a much different guest.
My name is Eliyahu Prero. I work as a financial coach for the Masila organization.
Eliyahu and I will discuss what you can do as an individual or a family in order to move towards financial success, and how his organization, Masila, can help you get there. Eliyahu, thank you so much for joining me this week. Can you give me a little bit of background on Masila as an organization? What does Masila do? When did it start? And how did we get up to where we are today?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here and pleasure to speak to all your listeners. The Masila organization was started by Reb Shmuley Margolis, who lives currently in Israel, and he saw the need for financial help in the Orthodox community, and we help people both in all types of communities. We don't not biased only towards Orthodox, but he's specifically based within the Orthodox community, and he saw the need for financial help and that people really needed a lot of help in their finances. And it ended up taking him a few different, we use the word in Hebrew, gilgulim, which means a few incarnations of the organization to get to where it is today. Initially, it was this type of debt consolidation organization where you would come to them. People would come with their debts and they would say, I have $50,000 debt to this, $25,000 debt to this. And they said, okay, well, if you have those debts, what we're going to do is we're going to make it into one lump sum, 75,000, and then you're going to make some type of individual payments, like per month. We'll make you a monthly plan. That worked for a little while until people would come with a larger loan, and they would say, hey, I had 75 and now I have $125,000. Can you help me? And then I have 150. So it didn't get to the root of the problem. Didn't get to the root issue of the problem. And currently, they don't give loans. They don't write letters for people. The organization really is into self-empowerment, and self-empowerment specifically in regards to finances, and to get at the root issue of why is it that your budget isn't balanced? Why is it that your finances are in the state that they are? Why isn't it that you're not meeting your financial goals, whatever they are? And that's what we work. So we work on self-empowerment, and that's kind of where it was and where it is today. And we work with all different types of people, millionaires to people who are businessmen, professionals, and educators as well. All different types of people in all different types of situations, from people who are in serious debt to people who have a serious amount of money. We're here to concretize financial goals and help people help themselves meet them.
So you mentioned earlier when you were introducing yourself that you are a financial coach. Can you explain the difference between, let's say, a financial coach and a financial advisor?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So what we have in common is that we have finance in common. We both deal with money. The advisor differs in a couple main components. Number one is the advisor gives advice. I do not give advice. My job as a coach is to bring out, clarify people's issues for themselves. My goal is to clarify their goals and then to say, what do you want to do? How do you want to reach them? So that's the coaching aspect versus the advice. I don't give advice. I don't say, this is what you should do in your situation. We say, hey, you're earning $1,000 a month. According to your spending, you need to be earning 1,500. What do you want to do about it? That's number one. I don't give advice. Number two, in regards to the financial advisor, is a person would classically go to a financial advisor, and especially if they're dealing with, let's say, retirement, which is a very, very popular issue, and they would say, the advisor would say, well, Mr. Cohn, nice to meet you. What do you want to do before you pass away? When do you want to retire? And what do you want to do after you retire? So there's going to be a difference if the Cohns want to retire to, let's say, North Carolina versus Florida. If they want to retire to North Carolina, well, then he's going to have enough money by the time he's 60. And if he wants to retire to move to Florida, he's going to have to wait till he's 65. And then we would have another level of what types of funds that he's going to invest in. Is he going to invest in mutual funds, individual stocks, and bonds? That's the role of the financial advisor. And there are multiple levels for that. The idea is the financial advisor, person's coming to the financial advisor with his monthly budget already made, with the goals already in place. And the financial advisor says, these are your goals. How can I help you? What investments can I sell you that will help you meet your goals? My job is before that. I'm the foundation. I'm here to say, okay, what do you want your goals to be? Let's work that out. Let's work the husband out. What do you want your goals to be? What are the wife's goals? What do you want your financial goals to be? Let's try to make some type of unified goal. And in addition, you come to the advisor, you say, I have $10,000 extra a year. How do I invest it? I come a step before and I say, based on your goals, we're going to need $10,000. What do we need to do in order to get those $10,000? So I'm working really a step before and saying, do we need to change your job a little bit? Do we need to stop spending a little bit? That's a little bit. I hope I clarified that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had episodes on this show earlier that discussed finances in the frum world specifically, but that discussion was more on a community level. What you're dealing with today, what we're talking about today, is more on an individual or family level. We're not talking about the greater community, the greater Orthodox community. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. My clients are primarily within the Orthodox community, and therefore their issues relate to the overarching issues in the Orthodox community, being high cost of housing, high cost of healthcare, high cost of tuition. All of those are reflected in my clients' issues. I don't work on the overall picture. I may have really, really smart ideas of how to help that out, but that's not my challenge. My challenge is I don't work on a communal level. I work on the individual level who struggles with the communal pressures and the issues that face everybody.
All right. And the last thing I'm curious about is, how did you fall into this profession? What's your personal background to make you qualified to deal with people's finances?
It's a good question. First of all, you assume that I am qualified. It's really great assumption there. Number one, I answered an ad in the paper, pretty much. I was looking for something extra to do with my time and to help out a little bit and expand. But essentially what I tell people is I grew up in a family of businessmen and lawyers. And yeah, there are some rabbis in the family, and our family is both mixed rabbis and businessmen, both attorneys and other professions, mostly attorneys. And growing up, the conversations would revolve around money and business, and getting a fine from the city from the city would often, my uncle would speak about how his clients would get a fine from the city and they would lose their liquor license if they wouldn't pay the fine. So he would tell his clients, the city just wants your money, just pay the fine and move on. And those were kind of the comments that would dominate the discussion. And my grandfather was in the parking lot business for many years, and my father's a practicing attorney. And being that it was, when I was in high school growing up, I thought that I would be an attorney and a businessman, following in the footsteps of my family. At the age of 17, I kind of segued from there. I learned in yeshiva, and I spent many years as a teacher, kind of running away from finance and running away even from my own personal finances, to tell you the truth. And I saw this was a really great ad. I said, oh, let me give them a call. And I was listening at the time, I was listening to this really, really great financial, I would say advisor, but he's really a financial guru named Dave Ramsey. And I'm sure many of you have heard it. You can even Google him.
He's got a podcast too.
He's got a podcast
much more popular than this one.
Well, we'll see where this goes. You know?
That's right.
And I was listening to him, and what he said really resonated with me. and the ability to become a coach, we had really, really resonated with me. And I took the training for a couple months. We had a training. It was pretty intense, to tell you the truth. And we had a lot of supervision involved during the training and ongoing. And to tell you the truth, once I started with my first client, it really lit a fire. It really did. And lit a fire within me that I could help people out. And I had the wherewithal to understand their financial situations. And I had the wherewithal to kind of absorb and deflect their fights about the financial situations. And I loved it. And I love the pressure. And I love the intensity. And I love the numbers. And I love the analytics. And all those together combined with my background. And people know that I taught for 10, 15 years. So they know that I learned in yeshiva. They know that I taught. They know that I'm one of them. I don't come from an ivory tower. I come to be with the people. I tell all my clients, and say, you are my biggest teachers. I come here to learn from you. And all my clients know, and I ask them questions. They say, well, you made that big business deal. How do you make that big business deal? They tell me they made a deal or they made money. I say, wow, that's very interesting. I write it down. And I'm here to learn. I really am. I'm here to learn from all my clients and all their struggles and how they deal with their struggles. They're my greatest teachers. So am I qualified? I guess I'm qualified, but I'm qualified only in the sense that I respect my clients and their struggles and know that they're really struggling. Some of them really are. And I respect that and how they deal with it. And we're here to make it better. So that's how I'm qualified.
I want to go a little bit deeper into background, not necessarily your background, but the background of individuals that are starting off, or maybe that they're well into their careers and lives. I notice amongst my friends, at least, that it's very different based on how you grow up. If you grow up in a very wealthy household, you're kind of used to a certain lifestyle. If you grow up in a more modest household, used to a different style. How do the way that people grow up kind of affect their expectations later on in life?
Oh, it's huge. It's huge. First stage in Masila is awareness. Awareness. We have to be aware of how much money we're spending every single month and how much money we're earning every single month. That's the first stage, is awareness. I tell my clients, awareness is not just numbers. Awareness is about behavior. Awareness is, why are you spending so much money? Awareness is, why aren't you making ends meet? Awareness is, what is your attitude towards finances? And during training, you wouldn't believe it, part of the script, and Masila is really it's a scripted interaction, because we have 6 sessions usually with clients as part of the general coaching. And we have a script that we follow. Part of the script is that we ask our clients, how was finances growing up and how did it affect you now? And what did your parents work as? Like, what was their job? Did they ever speak to you about finances? And people really open up to me. And tell you the truth, it's like the best part for all my clients to tell me about themselves and their families growing up. And some of them really struggled. Some of them didn't. So one story that comes to mind is a specific client that grew up whose father made a lot of money. And then when he made a lot of money in his business, he spent it all on buying nice things and vacations. Okay. They come to me, to my office, and they're about a couple $100,000 in debt. And they tell me that, well, you made money in your business. What'd you do with it? Oh, when we made money with our business, we bought nice things and went on vacations. And I asked them, I said, well, how was finances growing up? The husband says, well, when I was growing up, when my dad made money, he spent it on nice things and vacations. It was just incredible. I asked, it happens amongst doctors, like doctors' children. You wouldn't believe how the psychologists would love this. I speak to doctors' children. What did your father work as? A doctor. Okay, so tell me about finances. If they're from the older half of the family, then the father may have had a difficult time. He's going through school, he's going through residency, maybe a fellowship. He's busting it out there. He's coming home, working late hours. He's not making real money. Okay. When do they start making real money? Well, they're in their 30s, right? They're in their 40s. So in that case, placement is going to make a big issue, because if you're one of the first children, let's say they have 6 kids in the family. So if you're one of the first kids, you grew up with rationing. You grew up where your father was like pinching pennies. You grew up in the lower side of the family. Man, dad started to make money. We're going to Disney World, right? You're going, when you're 6 years old, you're going out to eat every week. You're going to Disney World. Dad wants to enjoy. Well, you weren't going to Disney World. The older sister wasn't going to Disney World. She wasn't buying fancy clothes all the time. Dad didn't have any money. He didn't know he could buy that even. The younger kids are. Now, that could affect people both ways. the older kid could say, I grew up penny pinching and I continue with that because that's the way I grew up and that's how I stay. They could have an adverse reaction and say, well, my dad pinched pennies. My husband's not going to be a doctor. My husband's going to be something else. I'm not pinching pennies. The younger sibling, if they continue on autopilot, would say, well, I want my husband to take me to Disneyland because, well, that's what I did growing up. Okay. I want to go on vacations. I want to go out to eat every week because my dad thought that was important. That's important to my husband. And they could go the other way as well. It's pretty rare, but and then that builds, unfortunately, that's going to build false expectation because you were growing up, you were daughter number 5. Your dad was already working. He already got his plastic surgery license or whatever he was doing. Yeah, then he had money. But guess what? You married a 25-year-old who's now is in residency. I hate to break it to you. When your dad was 25, he wasn't taking you out to Disneyland, right? He wasn't taking you out to restaurants. And that's an extreme example, right? But it happens all the time, and people just don't have proper expectations, and it sets them up for a lot of heartache.
So I want to talk about little expectations that go with, let's say, certain professions. Many people go on different career paths, obviously. Along with those career paths come different gives and takes. So let's say somebody that goes into education, they know that they're going to probably have a lower salary than somebody who's going into, let's say, becoming a lawyer or a doctor, but they also know that they're going to have more flexibility. They're going to have summers off. They're going to have a set schedule in terms of they're probably going to be teaching the same amount of time that their kids are in school. I know that I'm generalizing here, and my apologies to teachers that say, we have school, we have work that we have to do at home in prep and in grading. I know. I'm just doing a generalization here that there are certain advantages scheduling wise of being an educator versus being in a different profession per se. But I tend to think that people who are in, let's say, lower income professions might not take into account some of the challenges that are facing people that are generally in higher income professions. Do you want to touch a little bit on those types of things?
Yeah. First of all, in regards to the generalities that you said, they're all lies, and I just want to address them, okay? Because I take issue with them from a person who knows. So let's talk about educators, okay? Everything's a trade-off in life. The Mishnah tells us that there's no profession that doesn't make people wealthy and doesn't make people poor. Every profession has its pluses and minuses. Educator is a tough job. You can make money being an educator, okay? But, and there's a big qualifier, you can really suffer a lot being an educator. Being that an educator, you have time? Yeah, they have time. What do? They work in the morning. They get up 6 days a week. They're at school. Well, their $40,000 for the Rebbe job isn't going to cut it. Okay. That's not going to pay their mortgage. That's $36,000 a year. So that's just $4,000 to spend. So they're going to be working in the afternoon, right? So they're working in the morning. They're working in the afternoon. Sometimes they're doing tutoring at night, and they got to prepare, and they got to make phone calls. By the way, if their kids get married, maybe they're helping support their kids. I mean, that's a lot, and that's a lot of debt for them. That's number one in regards to free time. Summer's off. Some educators work in the summer harder than they work the whole year, and they have real jobs running camps or whatnot, and in management capabilities, administrative capabilities. That's tough. So, you know what? It's tough being an educator. By the way, you can be an educator working 3 jobs, yeah, and then be going on to all these different all these different organizations. Say, hey, you're 2 weeks late on your check. You're a month late on my check. I got my bills piling up. That's the story for a long time. Rabbi Beryl Wine once spoke. I heard a tape a long time ago about the yeshivas in Bavel, that they existed for like 400 years. He said, a yeshiva that exists for 400 years, that's going to be a large deficit. The point is that it's really tough out there. Some educators have it very, very tough, and they may work as hard as everybody else, even harder, and not make the money. However, people have a heart for the educators. Okay,
that's true.
There are organizations which are there for the educators. When they marry off kids, there'll be organizations that will help them. When they want to go to camp, maybe they get a little bit of break. You know what? Yontif time, everyone has for the educators. In contradistinction to people who are making a lot of money. So you have people who are really high earners, and they're okay. They're making over $300,000 a year. They're okay. They're making it. $250, you're making it. You know who has a hard time? The middleman has a hard time. You're an accountant, you're making $60,000 to $90,000 a year. Your wife's pulling in another 40, 50, 140. Believe me, that's gone in a second. You breathe, it's gone. Okay.
Yep.
Now, where are the organizations for those guys? Where's the Yontif help for those guys? Where's the summer camp help for those guys? Where's the wedding help for those guys? Where? It's nowhere. That's the problem.
So what happens to those people in those situations? Kind of the middle of the road with no outside help.
So either A, they're gonna have to earn more. I mean, what happens classically? They're gonna have to earn more money or spend less. Basically, explain to the organization to deal with that they're the middle of the road people. They're not making a lot of money, and even though it may seem like a lot of money, they're working as hard as they can, and this is what they have to pay. So either they're going to get into debt or they're going to negotiate with everybody. Similar to the educators who also have to negotiate with everybody. Yeah, people have a soft spot for the educators, but there has to be a soft spot for the middle people as well. People earning under $200,000. They also need help, and they need to keep their expectations low when it comes to weddings, when it comes to bar mitzvahs, and when it comes to bat mitzvahs. Just because you're earning $200,000 doesn't mean that you're really making it in today's Orthodox community.
So what's the number? So if $200,000 is, let's say, the ceiling for that middle group, what's the floor for that middle group? That if you're earning lower than that, people are getting help.
It's not about people getting help at a certain level. There's help in terms of Tomchei Shabbos, food packages that are going out every single week. Those are people who are not making it on a financial level. They can't buy their basic necessities. I'm not speaking about those people.
Okay.
Those are not the people that I'm working with. When I'm working with people who are getting supplemental income from other communal sources. For example, there's amazing institution in the New York area called Chasdei Lev. Amazing institution. They help out the educators around Yontif time, Sukkot, Pesach. They could be getting packages of goods. Tomchei Shabbos may even help out the people who need help, who are working people who need help. But you know what? That's really going more towards the educators. And the truth of the fact of the matter is that it's not just the educators who need help. It's the balabatim, it's the laymen, the people who are working, the 9 to 5, the 8 to 7s. They come home, they look at their finances, and they don't have anything left after the day is done. And they may be even growing more and more in debt.
So I want to do something a little different than what we've been discussing so far. I want to go through different stages of life and see what people in those stages, what issues they might be facing, and what they should be looking for in order to help out with those individual situations. So I want to kind of do it in a reverse order. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So let's start with people that are kind of empty nesters, 50s, 60s. They're not retired yet. They're still working. What are some of the issues that they're facing, and what can they do to help alleviate those situations?
So here's the thing. By starting backwards, you present me with a very, very big problem. And the problem is that the older someone gets, the more difficult it is to change. The habits are there. The skill set is there. You're in your 60s and you're not making it. We say change career. Like what career are you going to change? You're in your 50s and you're an accountant and you're not making it. Like, what are you going to do exactly? Yeah, you can get more jobs. You can add a little bit. God helps everybody out. But the radical change is not going to be that. It's not going to be in your 50s. You're not really going to be able to invest in a new career, and it may not even be wise for you to completely change. When you're in your 20s and you're really solidifying your goals, your life goals, so yeah, that's the time when really people could and should really solidify where they want to be in the future, what their goals are, and they could really maneuver incredible amount of change for people in their 20s. So getting back to your question, people in their 60s, they may be marrying off kids at that point in time, maybe supporting kids and grandkids. So I would put that as like a number one issue is, let's say the kids are out of the house and you're sending them some Hanukkah geld and you may be even supporting them monthly. There really exists a question of, well, you're in a sandwich generation because you got to support yourself. Well, you're half the sandwich and you're also supporting your kids. That's their 60s. So looking towards retirement, for a person to know when they want to retire, how much money they're going to need when they retire, how long they can keep on working at their jobs. People working longer and longer. So it's very important. People in their 60s, people in their 50s, moving on, they're making weddings. in their 50s. You're
Right.
making weddings.
Making
You're
weddings, maybe your kids are going to college.
You're making weddings. Your kids are going to college, and that's active negotiation right there. Weddings are really tough. Okay. In full disclosure, I have not made a wedding myself. I am happily married, but I have not made a wedding for any of my kids. Please God, I should do soon, and we should listen to this when that happens.
Amen.
Thank you. However, wedding presents itself an issue even greater than bar mitzvahs because there are two sides to a wedding. I was speaking to somebody yesterday. We have two types of weddings here in New York. We have a takana wedding and we have a regular wedding. So a takana means a decree. Well, it's not an evil decree. Just the point is there's a standard set. You go to a hall, they have some standard sets, $15,000 for the wedding. Okay. It's pretty much bargain basement over there for that wedding.
Mhm.
And you have a $50,000 wedding. You can have a $500,000 wedding. So let's say, for example, for my daughter, I'm interested in making a takana wedding. Well, she gets engaged to a guy whose family only wants a Teres Avram. They only want a $100,000 wedding. I mean, so what do I do? Do I break the bank? How do I negotiate with them? How do I say, well, listen, I was really only interested in making a takana wedding. Then they get upset with me. Then the couple is facing some type of pressure for the finances. So I say, you know what? Listen, they want it this way. It's important for my daughter's relationship with her new husband. I'm going to take out the loans and I'm just going to, piggyback that for a long time. Well, that's a problem because that's also not healthy for the father-in-law to be doing that. In which case, I'm not sure of a solution because there are two sides. One solution would be to have a nicer wedding for the community to continue to bring together to make amazing chasana halls with products of weddings that people can actually semi-afford. And the other idea is my idea is before the couple is dating to really say they can go out. We're just not people of means. Just to be straightforward with you guys, we're not going to be spending $100,000 on this wedding at the Hilton. So
Right.
those are
It's always a good idea to get the finances out in the open, even if it's uncomfortable in those situations. I'm guessing it would be kind of a similar thing if somebody said, oh, I would like to go to Harvard for college, and the parents can't afford it. Better to have them know the financial situation beforehand. As opposed, maybe Harvard isn't the greatest example because that's already a different level. Maybe let's say NYU versus a state college. So you have a large financial burden on tuition that maybe you didn't have before versus a state college where, yes, it's definitely a lower level of prestige in the education, but it's what I can't afford at this point. And have that conversation with the child.
That's exactly right. So that's the conversation that people in their 30s and 40s are going to be having with children. Doesn't start when they're going to college. It starts earlier. And to have those open conversations with children. What are finances? What's a budget? And again, you don't have to overwhelm the child. And that would be with anything you're talking about with children. You don't have to overwhelm them, but just to know that things cost money and we're doing what we can. And kids are always asking for more. I want at this point insert a comment that my supervisor, Moshe Cohn, says, you always pay for it, either sooner or later. Okay. Meaning you make that wedding, you take out those loans, you're going to pay for it sooner or later. You go take out that education, everyone's going to pay for it either sooner or later.
Right.
You buy a couch, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it sooner, you're going to pay for it later. I had a client once. We went over their debts and blah, blah, blah. This 5,000, this 10,000, this, that. Okay. Is that it? Well, we have a couch. I said, okay. Yeah, but it doesn't count. I said, why? What's the couch? Well, we needed a couch. We bought a couch for $1,200. Well, why doesn't it count? Well, it's payments, right? I mean, payments doesn't count. I said, they're not charging us any interest. I said, no, it does count. And you're paying for it $50 a month until you're over, that's, you're going to pay for that couch. You're either paying for it sooner or later. And that's
right.
why I pretty much say that at a certain point with any client, I'm going to be using that phrase from my supervisors. You're always going to pay for it either sooner or later. In regards to the people in their 40s and 30s, I would say.
Right, I would guess that people in their 30s and 40s, the two primary expenses that they're talking about at that point are tuition and mortgage, unless there's something else that I'm missing.
Well, tuition and mortgage. Let's explain it for a second here. Let's take a step back. Tuition and mortgage are going to be examples of fixed expenses. Those are
Right.
expenses that will stay the same every single month.
I would say that the tuition goes up year by year.
Yeah.
It might be more if there's more kids. So if a child enters the tuition stage, then that's going to be more on an annual basis. But yes, monthly they're fixed.
So I would like to differentiate between at this point between fixed expenses and running expenses. So fixed expenses stay the same every single month. I know how much my daycare is going to be. I know how much my mortgage is going to be. The running expenses do not. And the running expenses may be gas for car. They may be groceries. Someone wants to give me $2,000 a month for groceries. I could spend it. They want to give me $2,000 a month at restaurants. I could also spend it. They want to give me $2,000 at the liquor store. Depending on the month, I may know how to spend it. Those are running expenses. Running expenses, they run out of control. So those need a budget to decide before the month begins, how much am I spending on the running expenses. In regards to the fixed expenses, in order to change those are not mere budgeting. Those are more lifestyle changes. So if I'm living in New York and my tuition is $15,000 a year per kid, and I went to my kid's yeshiva and I pleaded and I clapped al chait, I said, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And they said, minimum 15 grand or forget about it. So I have a problem. And my question is, do I continue to live in this community where it costs me $15,000 per kid, bottom basement price, or do I move somewhere else? In which case, that's going to be a lifestyle change. Now, if I don't move somewhere else and I refuse to make more money and I can't get help from anybody else, there's another option, which is to go more and more into debt. And the debt could be either a home equity line of credit, it could be a personal line of credit, it could be credit cards. And that's what people are falling more into every single day. It could be 5% a year, 10% a year, or 30% a year, depending on the line of credit that people get in their desperation.
And you're seeing those things happen kind of in the 30s and 40s, or is...
I'm seeing that happen for people in their 20s.
Wow. So let's get into 20s. 20s, in my mind, that should be a relatively more, especially early 20s, that should be more an easier thing. 20s, you're single, you're newly married, maybe you have one kid, especially in the early 20s. I feel like that's the time when you're instituting your financial goals. Whether you're single, whether you're married, you and your spouse can do it. So what advice would you give to people so that they wouldn't end up doing those things where they're advancing lines of credit as early as their 20s?
Okay, to quote
advice.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the word advice. Not okay. You don't give advice. Sorry.
I'll give advice. I don't give advice to my clients. I'll give advice in the podcast.
Okay.
The 20s, to quote our president, is a total disaster. Okay. When people should be sitting down, where do I want to be? What do I want to be? Developing healthy habits. As a couple, we find that when people have the extra money, what are they doing with it? What are they doing with it? Not a problem to go on vacations, not a problem to go out to restaurants, not a problem to decide where you want to be based on finances and how much you want to live your life. People live haphazardly without a plan. They get into debt real quick. The world today is like a tightrope. Okay. You walk the tightrope, you're doing fine until one small thing happens. Then you end up in 10, 20, 30, $60,000 in debt. You're in your 20s. You just don't know how to get out. And those are the people, those are the saddest. That's what I'm working with right now with many of my clients. People who are very young, in a lot of debt. They didn't know when they first got married to live as a couple, it's going to cost you $40,000, $50,000 a year to live. No one told them that. So they get maybe some parents help out a little bit around Yontif time. Okay. Some people give $1,000 a month. They make a little extra. Before they turn around, they could be in debt $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. Along comes a kid. It's going to cost them money every single year, every single month in childcare. Another $10,000 a year could cost for childcare. Okay, $10,000 a year, easy. Now, where's that coming from? You got to earn the money, and if you don't earn the money, where are you going to get it? You're going to borrow. Okay, and people take the path of least resistance. They're going to pay their bills for the daycare, but their grocery bills are going to come off the credit card. Then the credit card's it's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. It's tough. It's tough. I had a couple call me up, maybe in the 30s. They've been married for how long? They were in $25,000 in debt. Okay. So I said, whoa, $25,000 in debt. How long have you been married for? They said, well, we've been married for about 12 years. I said, oh, well, do the math. I have my calculator in front of me. I said, so 12 years, $24,000 in debt. they're on like $2,000 a year. So $2,000 a year, it's about like a couple $100 a month. Yeah, like you guys like spend an extra couple $100 every single month. Not regard even there's interest, right? Could have been like $70 a month.
Right.
So you guys spent by extra $70 a month. So the $70 a month that people spend, if you put it on a credit card bill of 25%, that adds up to be a lot. And a lot of finance and mathematics goes into that. We could speak about it if you want. But people really have to be aware of the financial situation. My esteemed history teacher, Rabbi Shmuel Jablon, told us in history class, in American history, that life imitates baseball. He's really big on life imitates baseball. And
All right.
American history imitates baseball. And just to take that a little bit, going a little bit further with that analogy, is that finances imitate baseball. The biggest change in baseball has been analytics, okay, over the past 15, 20 years. Where the batter's going to hit the ball, what pitches does he hit, and we look over the tapes, and they go over, and they say, well, let's say he's in the seventh inning. And sometimes it's a little crazy, right? Yep. But analytics are really, really where it's at. And the top managers and the top GMs are in analytics. And the whole way they shift the infield and the outfield is all based on chances. And really, what is that? That's awareness. Okay, that's Masila. That's Masila approach. We're looking over where you do well, where you don't do well, and to be aware of the different issues that come up and to analyze. The more time you spend on analytics, the better chances you have of making it. That's the advice that I would give to anyone that comes to me is awareness, awareness, awareness. Be aware of the bottom line. Don't throw out the credit card bills. Don't keep them shut and just throw them out. Don't just pay your bills and let them. Take a second, make a spreadsheet. If you need to call somebody else to help you out, there are people there to help you to make everything together. Find out what your bottom line is. See what you need to do. And the answer, 80%, according to Masila, 80% of change is due to awareness. Just knowing where you are, where you want to be. And that's where the change comes. Doesn't come from anything that I say. I'm not the greatest motivator. Person's own personal situation. Take off the blinders. Make yourself aware of where you are. That goes a long way.
So everything you're saying, you're basically talking about discussions that you have with families, with couples. I would imagine that, especially when it comes to matters of money, you find yourself in the throes of maybe some relationships that are on a slippery slope. Where do you draw the line between financial coach and marriage counselor or a therapist? Like, how does that work for you? And I'm assuming you're not qualified to be a therapist, but where does that go? How do you manage that type of relationship?
So that's a really great question. Number one, I'm going to tell you something that I hope every therapist would know. And that is, according to the great financial guru, Dave Ramsey, the number one issue that people have in their marriage is money. Money, okay? And I'll explain to you the depth behind it. Anything that a couple does together will necessarily have conflict because each person is different, okay? If you're doing things separately, then there's no conflict. And I'll give you an example. I was never criticized for the way that I bowl. Never criticized. My mom, my sister, my wife, my kids, maybe my kids do, okay? You know what? The way I bowl influences me alone, and that's it. But everything else that influences somebody else, from the way that I dress, the haircuts that I get, how I interact with people, well, that's just an open target, right? Because it really does affect other people. That's also awareness, right? Couple comes together. Each one lived on their own. One father was a doctor. The other father was an accountant. They fell in love, and that's really, really great, okay? But guess what? Now they're coming to build their lives together. But each one of them has a different way of looking at finances. So my idea is to say, let's be aware. Let's be aware of each of your upbringings. Let's be aware of your current financial situation. Let's be aware of your goals and your shared goals. And what are your goals? I say to Chaim, what are your shared goals? I say to Sarah, what are your goals? And say, okay, can we make where's the room? Where do you guys overlap? That's great. A therapist, the main thing a therapist has to know that and let's assume for the moment, if the number one problem is money, and if it's not the number one, according to the therapist data, which I've also seen, it's within the top 5, okay, or top 10. If it's number one is money, how do we deal with money? How does a therapist come in to anyone in their office and say, I have a problem with my wife? My wife comes in, I have a problem with my husband. Do they ever ask, how is your monetary situation? What's your financial situation? What's your budget? What are you working at? Are you happy with your job? Well, I have a question. If this is the number one reason for stress in a marriage, if finance is the number one reason, they should be asking about finances. And if the number one way, and this is just our opinion, you could have another way of dealing with finances is budgeting, then what I suggest that every therapist should do in their office when a couple comes in and says, what's your financial situation? How much are you spending a month? And who's spending it? You know what the problem is? They can't handle the pressure. That's what they can't do. That's real pressure, right? They can't handle the heat. So the idea is every therapist, when a couple comes in, when they're doing a workup, says, what's your financial situation? What's your budget? What are the numbers? Okay? That's for sure. Just tell me the numbers and what are your goals. That's before I'm doing it, right? Now, you can have a situation where things are really tough. And you know what? That's when I thrive. I love it when they're in a fight and they're upset with each other. And I say, great, let's make a deal. I'm here to make a deal. I'm not here to fix up how upset you are at each other for the past 20 years. I'm not here to help how the wife's upset with the husband, how he mismanages the finance for 20 years. I'm not here to help work out why the wife is overspending and how he's upset with her. I'm not here for that. Let's make a deal. And when people hear me say, let's make a deal, they know that I'm talking business because I'm here to make a business deal between the husband and the wife. I am here for business of marriage. That's what I'm here for, because marriage is a business, by the way, and people don't understand that. Whole nother podcast for a whole nother time. But I will tell you where I draw the line, and let me give you a story where I draw the line. A client of mine likes to spend, they're having a little bit of financial difficulties. The wife likes to spend money on jewelry, okay? Spends money on jewelry, and they're in significant debt. Let's say $100,000 in debt. By the way, this is not one client, it happened a few times. So they're in serious debt, and I'm just changing jewelry from other things, but the idea is the same. So we go over their finances and we say, okay, you spent last year $3,000 on jewelry. Yeah. Okay. What do you want to do for next year? What's going to be in your budget for next year? So Sarah says, I want to spend $3,000 on jewelry. So do you take out my awareness card? I said, you are aware that your credit cards are at 24%, correct? Yes. You are aware that your debt will double in 3 years. Yes. And you are aware that your income does not meet your expenses, that your expenses are more than your income. Yes. How much you want to spend on jewelry? Well, next year I'm going to spend $3,000. You say, okay, let's put that in the budget. Then I go to Chaim. I say, Chaim, this is also your business. What do you want to spend? And he says, well, I don't know. I say, okay, well, you guys got to work that out. So if there's differences of opinion, I can make a deal. I give it one shot each. And I say, what do you want? What do you want? If you put your feet in the ground and you say, I'm on $100,000 in debt and I'm spending $3,000 a year on jewelry, then you know what? You got to work it out. And I'm not going to be the one to do that.
Right. So at that point, I guess you step out and you say you have to find somebody else in order to do that aspect of it. I'm here to just make a deal.
I'm here to make a deal. That's
Right.
what I'm here for. That's it. And you know what? By the way, they work it out. They work it out. They come tough. You know, they're tough guys. I spend this, I spend that, and I give it my one shot each. I'm not here to change anybody's mind. I say I'm here to make a deal. Let that sit. Let that percolate a little bit in their mind.
Once you institute the word deal, then both sides know that they have to give a little bit in order to get a little bit. Once you frame it as a deal, I'm guessing.
It's a deal like anything else.
I make deals with my 5-year-old and my 2-year-old all the time. You want to make a deal? You could stay up 10 minutes, but you have to clean your room. That's a great deal for me because it's going to take me like 15 minutes to clean up her room by myself. Because they have another 10 minutes to clean her room. I win.
You ever think of becoming a Masila coach? You do a great job.
We'll talk offline. So you've mentioned a bunch of times about awareness, but you've also spoke about the 3-stage Masila process. What are the other 2 stages of the Masila process after awareness?
Quickly, the next stage is change. So we have awareness, we have change, we have maintenance. Each person is affected differently by the stages. Just to give you an idea of what change is, I read a book once by a therapist named Michelle Weiner Davis, and in the end of her book, she writes that I wrote a whole book about marriage, and I could tell you that fixing a marriage is like weight loss. Okay, how to help someone with weight loss? Well, eat less and exercise more. So, in, so fixing a marriage,
Problem solved.
problem solved. If it doesn't work, then change, and if it's working, don't change. Right?
Right.
So I like to say, well, earn more and spend less. Okay, great. So basically, change is earn more, spend less. It's a little more nuanced than that. There are different ways that we approach. There are a few different ways that we give people the choice, the option. Some people don't want to spend less. Some people do not want to spend less. They spend a certain amount at the grocery store, they a certain amount of restaurants, they have a certain amount. They say, I'm sorry, my lifestyle does not allow me to spend less. I go to the store and I buy the hand matzah and I spend $500 on the hand matzah for Pesach, and that's what I want. And I say, I'm not here to influence your decision. Another thing with Masila, what they have like these 12 commandments in the back of every single booklet. And one of them is, we are not here to influence your values. So I'm not here to influence anyone's values. I'm here to work with their values. So if someone says, I want to spend $500 on matzah, I say, great. Change is what you want it to be. If you want to stay the same, you want income enhancement. So you got to do, and you want income enhancement. If you want to do streamlining, which means to keep the same basic budget, but instead of spending $2,000 a month on groceries, to spend $1,800 on groceries, great. The next thing is a lifestyle change. And that basically is move to Cleveland. Okay. Meaning that if you aren't happy in the New York City area and you need to change your lifestyle, and changing your lifestyle is by looking around, looking at yourself, looking at your neighbors and saying, this is not a tweak. I don't need a tweak here and there. Nuh-uh. It's not what I need. I need a change. Okay. And some people opt for. Okay. And then after we have income enhancement and streamlining, the other in the basic category, the other choice that someone can make is raising the deficit, is going more and more into debt. Because we have to understand that if you sit around on your couch and you don't do anything, well, that's also a choice. You're choosing to sit down, you're choosing to go more and more in debt. And people like the victim mentality. I'm a victim of my circumstances. I'm a victim of the high cost of living. I'm a victim of the high cost of food. I'm a victim of the weddings. And stop it. You're not a victim. I don't tell my clients, stop it. Okay. No one is a victim. You're not a victim. You could change. You could do it. Even if you take one step in the right direction, even if you just have awareness, you could change. Okay. You can do it. And don't blame yourself anymore. Look for positive steps, and you could change little things. As we said before, someone who spends $70 extra a month, yeah, after 30 years, yeah, that's going to hurt. And if you save $70, you make the painful changes now, it'll help you in the future. So everyone has hope. And that's what I try to give my clients, is hope. The third stage is maintenance. Maintenance is building a budget. Maintenance is looking forward. The difference between awareness and maintenance. Awareness means, what did you do until now? First two meetings, what did you do until now? How much do you spend? How much do you earn? Then we have changes. We discussed in meeting number 3 what changes you want to make. In meeting number 4, you better have made them already. Well, it doesn't mean you can make them necessarily in 2 weeks, but we try to really sit, what changes did you make? After meeting number 4, I don't speak that much about change. I'm looking more into the future, and we're building a budget. So maintenance is saying, we're here January 1st, 2020. Where are we going to be on February 1st, 2020? Let's look ahead to the future, where we're going to be. Let's look ahead to the future in 2021. Where do you think you're going to be in 2021? Because you know what your expenses are, basically. You know what they're going to be. You may have emergency expenses, but we all know that emergencies happen, and they're going to be about $10,000 a year of emergencies. Of your fridge is going to break, and your washing
Your
machine
car is going to break, and all, yeah.
and your car is going to break, especially if you're lower income. So if you're lower income, you're not necessarily riding around in the nicest cars with the newest appliances, and they're going to break. So don't
Right.
tell me that I had $5,000 of unexpected expenses if the unexpected expenses are coming every single year. So you got to
Right.
budget for that also. That's budgeting towards the future. One thing is important I want to add before we go on. We talked about 3 stages. Awareness, stage 1. Change is stage 2. Maintenance is stage 3. We could finish all the stages and finish and still not see any change until a person is really done with stage 3 and he projects where he's going to be and he says, okay, Now I see where I'm going. Now I know where I'm going to change. I can't force the change. It has to happen organically. It has to happen each client on their own. And I tell my clients, I'm the least pushy of all coaches. But those three, that's the magic formula that Masila is all about. Those three amazing stages.
When should financial literacy begin? How early should parents be instilling this in their children? And if you have a method of maybe an allowance method that you recommend, what do you think about those types of things?
Okay. In terms of financial literacy, I would say this goes along with a lot of other things that parents would teach their children about adult life. So, however you teach children about adult life would be a good model for explaining this. The first thing I would say is model by example. And an example goes a really, really far away. The more disciplined a parent is, hopefully it'll seep down to their kids. That's number one. Live within your budget, live within your means, afford the nice things in life if that's what you want, and be able to pay for them in cash. That's number one. Number two is in regards to raising children, they kind of tend to look at all the other kids and say, hey, every one of my friends has such and such. I need such and such. At that time, a person could be really honest with their kids and say, hey, we can't really afford that at this time. And we would love to give it to you. That's just out of our budget. And you're not saying that it's not important for you. You're not saying that we're not going to give it to you because we don't like you. We're saying that I understand your need. I just can't afford it. It's just not in the budget. Somebody would say can't afford it is not a good thing to say because then it may produce anxiety. But basically, it's not in the budget. So we want to teach responsibility, but not invoke anxiety. And that's basically the guidelines. A person wants to give an allowance and kind of budget with kids and say, where are you? Where are you going to be? And, how much you want to spend and what you want to spend it on. Those are all, really important points. Where I would say is more monkey see, monkey do. Kids will pick up on the parents' habits. And if they're careful and they see it as a healthy way of living, hopefully, like any other habit, be it eating habit, exercise habit, the kids will hopefully pick it up because they see that it's important to the parents. It'll be important to the kids.
So a lot of what we spoke about today, especially the 3 Masila steps, it's all individual based. And I mentioned this in the beginning of the show as well. Is there a role for the community to play and to help alleviate or help solve any of the issues that face their community in a financial level?
Yeah, good question. I think there is. I think that in terms of community, listen, it's a shame what's happening here. It's a disaster. It's a travesty. People don't realize there's something called the tuition crisis. It's not a tuition crisis. It's a life crisis. People have kids, okay, 3 or 4 kids, and then they say maybe even less, and they say that's it. Like I can't afford it. I'm dying here in this budget. Like I can't afford to have any more kids. And what happens is that the yeshiva tuition is really taking them down. And one rabbi who I read a little while ago said that it's quite ironic that when Yehuda came to Mitzrayim, he brought with him a yeshiva. And a yeshiva was always the existence of the Jewish nation from day one. The yeshiva was always with the Jewish nation, and the yeshiva is a mainstay of the Jewish nation. Today, the yeshiva is a tremendous challenge. It presents a challenge for the Jewish nation because people aren't having kids because they're afraid to pay the tuition. So it's a crisis what's going on. And it's a crisis what's going on with couples, what's going on, how many fights they get over the finance and the tuition and the housing and the shoals and the food and the weddings and the bar mitzvahs all takes a toll on the family unit. Number one, community. If the people on the top of the community will listen to this podcast, if the people who are in charge of the community will listen to the cries of the people, and I'm evoking some type of Exodus level crisis, but it is. You listen every single night to people fighting, you'll be just as, if you can handle it, you'll be just as invigorated as I am about it. If they would listen to the cries of the people and realize that it's a really, really tough situation out there, and I'm just being nice about it, then they will bring in serious reform to the tuition, to the shoals, and even possibly to the food, to the weddings, to the bar mitzvahs. But first, we have to listen. First thing, we have to realize how bad the situation is. It's not a crisis is a disaster. It's really tough for couples. Being that as it may, in terms of positive change, we need to have change from the top down. Schools are very, very expensive to run. Providing healthcare for the educators and an adequate salary is very, very expensive. However, there are ways to cut costs in the schools, but more importantly, there's a lot of Jewish money out there. And there's a lot of money going to a lot of things. And I would like to see some of the billionaires giving money as subsidies for couples with 3 kids, with 4 kids, with 5 kids, with 6 kids who are getting hit with these big bills. I would like to see people getting together and saying, this is a real issue and we need the billionaires to step up. And I'm sorry to quote politics, but to give their fair share in this regard specifically, because it is really the future of our nation that's at stake. And it's getting worse and worse because this is it's not going away. In terms of housing, there are places where housing is more expensive. It's your choice to live in Teaneck, Bergenfield versus Fairlawn. Your choice. Teaneck is going to cost you a lot of money than Fairlawn. And if you want to live in Teaneck, be prepared to pay Teaneck houses. Okay, $600,000 for a house, tiny nothing. $1 million for a house. You can spend that money in other communities and get more. So you have a choice when you buy your house. Be aware of the implications of your choice. Be aware of how it's going to affect your finances. Listen, Dave Ramsey says that however much you spend on a house should only be 1/4 of your total take-home pay every single month. So if you're spending $4,000 on a mortgage, which is quite common today, you should be earning $16,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Okay. Now that is talking to people who are non-Jews who are not paying high food costs and housing costs and Pesach and Sukkot. Okay. And that's just like what he says to be financially responsible. I think people today are paying not even a third, like a half, sometimes even 2/3 of their a half is going to their income. Their income is going to the housing costs. And that's really putting a stress on not a third or a fourth, a half. And that's really going to it. In terms of weddings, the idea is, yes, we collect for weddings. Yes, we can institute takanas, what you guys do for your bar mitzvahs and what you don't do. Okay, will people listen to it or not? I don't know. But to make, on a communal level, to make halls that are affordable, that have open dates for people, in which there are standard fares for weddings that people go to and say, that was a nice wedding. It was a beautiful hall. And that's subsidized by the community. And by the way, the caterers love it because they're always booked. The caterers love it, the caterers love it, and everyone loves it. So the idea is not to make bargain basement weddings and not to eliminate the fancy weddings. The guy wants to spend $500,000 on his wedding, isn't there hate? But the idea is to make affordable options for people that are nice. And that could come only with the community realizing the issue and coming together.
Any other thoughts that you want to impart on us?
Okay, one idea that I want to talk about is the concept of how finance intersects with a personal life. People view their lives as a life and their business as a business. And as I spoke about previously, marriage is a business. And people ask me, well, that sounds really, terrible. Why would you say marriage is a business, right? Family is a business? Like, no, we have a business. It's a business. Family is family. So I want to explain to you my basic outlook. The idea is that I explain to clients, almost every client gets this schmooze from me, is that imagine your house is a factory. Every factory is going to have cost. It's going to have overhead. It's going to have a product. And let's say your product is shoes. So you're going to have to order a certain amount of leather. You're going to have to produce a certain amount of shoes. You're going to have to pay for the machinery to make the shoes. You're going to have to pay for the lights. You're going to have to pay for the people to clean it up, for people to make the shoes. And you will spend time going over the budget. How many shoes are you going to need to make for spring and for the fall? That's analytics. That's awareness, right? A house works the same way. We have the incomes from mom and dad, and each one of them together is making a product in this factory. And the product could be their children. Their product could be their own personal lives. Their product could be happiness. Their product could be Torah, because my Torah learning is really important. I'm going to, my product is the 8 hours of Torah learning that I spend a day. By the way, I don't mean to take out singles from this talk. Sometimes even for singles, the idea of your life as a factory is also very, very important. There may be some singles who are listening. And the idea is that a person who is single, take a look at your finances right now. Take a look at what they are. What are your financial goals? Don't be afraid to bring up finances on a date. And when you have that extra money, you may want to put it away for even larger goals. that's a separate conversation. When I speak to couples about the idea of the house being a factory, it really, really sinks in, and they really understand that the more time that I spend looking over my house and viewing it as a product, and that my children are a product, and my simchas achayim, the happiness of my life, is a direct product of the work that I put into figuring out how I'm going to make it, and figuring out my finances, and how much time I'm going to spend on finances, and how much time I'm going to spend quality time with my family. That really has an impact on people, and it begins to sink in, and they don't view it as a burden. They don't view finances as, oh man, I have to do the finances. They view it as a challenge. They view it as something that they can do, and it's ultimately going to better their lives.
That's a beautiful thought. Where can people learn more about Mesila?
Mesila has a website, and you could look it up on the internet. M as in Mary, ESILA, Mesila.org, O-R-G. They have different branches in Israel, in the UK, in America. The American number is 212-784-6780. That's 212-784-6780. If somebody wants to give me a shout out via email, they're certainly welcome to. And my email is eprero, E-P as in Peter, R-E-R-O, at mesilausa.org. Again, eprero, Prero, at mesilausa.org. If they want to email me directly, they're more than welcome to.
Eliyahu Prero, thank you for taking the time out this week to talk to us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time that you took to spend with me to discuss these very, very important issues. And I look forward to hearing some amazing feedback from your listeners.
My thanks to Eliyahu Prero for joining me this week. Listen, we know that there isn't an easy way out of financial hardships. If there was, this wouldn't be an interesting topic to cover. But I certainly hope that the information Eliyahu imparted today was useful and can help you to start changing the ways we all think about money. If you want to hear a more macro episode on this topic, I suggest you check out episode 14 of this podcast, a discussion on From Finances, where we discuss what one community in Los Angeles is doing to help ease the fiscal burdens from life. We hope that any struggles or issues you may be having with finances are temporary, and anything you learned today may help you on the path to making it better. But for the immediate future, as always, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Swirly Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg from Journeys 4. You can email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Jewish_living. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.